Welcome everyone to the CloudReach Roundtable on innovation. What do diversity and inclusion got to do with it? My name is Sydney Greenberg and I am the creative branding and design lead here at CloudReach. So as you all know, June is celebrated as Pride Month. It's been historically celebrated to honor the 1969 Stonewall Uprising in New York City. These protests at the Stonewall Inn marked a huge turning point in the gay liberation movement, galvanizing the community there and inspiring the inclusive legislation that we celebrate today. Pride Month is an important symbol of equality, justice, and freedom to be who you are, no matter your sexual orientation or gender identity. And we're recognizing the powerful contributions that a community can make when they come together and stand up for who they are. And, as we all have seen the human rights crisis unfolding in the US and across the globe today shows us that though progress has been made in some areas, the fight for equal rights and justice is far from over. So it's our responsibility to act and continue having these important conversations. And to specifically at CloudReach, when it comes to innovating and creating new ideas, it's really important that we have diverse perspectives in the room and that all voices feel comfortable being heard. So we thought that Pride Month would be a good opportunity to kickstart this meaningful conversation around diversity and inclusion and why these are crucial ingredients to innovating and pioneering in the industry today and outside of the tech industry. So how can we do better? How can we be allies? The panelists today will speak about their personal experiences. We'll talk about some case studies and what businesses can do to empower everyone to feel respected at work and feel comfortable and included in being who they really are. And with me, I have Greg Whiten, Cloud Operations Manager, Bolin, Head of Talent Acquisition, Armando Garin, People Operations Specialist, and Sarah Everett, Internal Comms and Culture Lead. So with that, I'll hand it over to our moderator, Dave Chapman, who is the Head of Strategy and Professional Services here at CloudReach. Dave, off to you.
Thanks, Sid. And hi, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Let's just quickly go around the table, and why don't you just take a moment to introduce yourself? Armando, why don't you kick us off? Give us a bit of background.
Yes, so my name is Armando. I joined CloudReach about 1 year ago. Actually, in July, it's going to be 1 year. It's been a hell of a ride. I feel I've been here for 5 years already.
Yeah, 1 year in CloudReach time, man.
Exactly. And I feel, really glad to be here today talking and hopefully doing something meaningful for the business and for everybody in general, just from a humanistic standpoint.
Thanks, man. It's great to have you. Bolin?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Bolin. I joined 3 years ago. I actually joined during Pride Month, just after the weekend after Pride London, so the Monday after Pride London. So that was interesting. And I head up the talent team here.
Thanks, Bolin. Greg?
Hi there. So I'm Greg. I'm a Cloud Operations Manager. I've been with CloudReach now 2.5 years, and I totally understand what you mean about aging in dog years. Really looking forward to this. Really, this is something where we get to take advantage of feeling incredibly comfortable to come to work at CloudReach. So looking forward to see where this goes.
Great to have you. And last but by no means least, Sarah. Hi.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I am on the internal communications and culture team, and we're on a larger people team at CloudReach. I'm based in Atlanta, and I'm here to contribute any thoughts around allyship and generally being supportive at work.
Let's actually start with some basic definitions of diversity and inclusion, and let's explore that a little bit before we try to apply that to innovation and some personal experiences. So let's split the two words apart because they get bracketed together as if they're we're always meant to be together, but they've got individual meanings, I think. So let's start with diversity to start with. Greg, what's your thoughts on diversity as a standalone item?
Yeah, definitely. So diversity can cover a wide range of things, like the name implies, where it could be that diversity of thoughts, or you're looking for people who come into work or just come into your life and have a different approach than you do. There's also diversity in terms of like sexual orientation, sex, race as well there. And that's something where it's very separate from inclusion, I think, there. And it is that sort of thing in where, fair enough, you can't have one without the other, but you certainly need to at least start with diversity.
Mm. Mm. Would anyone else like to offer a view on, or add to Greg's view on that?
Well, to me, it's diversity. It goes hand in hand with inclusion. I know you mentioned that they're two separate words, but it can have very negative effects if you don't include inclusion. If you're focusing on diversity. To me, diversity is who you are, the unseen and the seen. So, for example, I'm a female. I'm Spanish and gay, right? The seen and unseen. So yeah.
Gotcha. And Armando, but just building on that, then let's move on to inclusion. Building on Belen's point, how does inclusion come together to sort of strengthen the situation?
Yeah, as Belen again mentioned, it's when the people, everybody's diverse, right? So everybody has their own uniqueness, and in companies, when we want to talk about D&I, we want to make sure that everybody feels included into like a puzzle, a big puzzle, right? So everybody's everybody's a piece, and we need, for the machine to work, we need a puzzle, we need diverse characteristics, we need diverse capacities in order to for everybody to bring themselves to work, and for the company to at the end to be profitable.
Yeah, I think at company level, it feels like if you've got an organization where everybody feels fully comfortable and fully able to make their biggest contribution, that has to drive the most value, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There are several studies around this. I don't think it's something that we need to refer to again, but profitable companies really look into that, because you can tackle different aspects of your business, not only when you think about the reach of the different cultures that you have within your company. For instance, in CloudReach, we have a lot of cultures and knowledges, and we can use that and we can tap that into becoming more competitive and more successful. If we have a client that is, for instance, very much LGBTI friendly, we don't have the capacity to recognize that. Maybe the client recognizes that we don't have the right diversity strategy, and maybe they choose another competitor. So I think having diversity, having a strategy around diversity and inclusion, makes us more competitive long term in the market.
So the original question of how you define and describe diversity and inclusion, right? And I'm conscious of the attention span of the world and the need for pithy mnemonics and things, but I think a really simplistic way that people can remember what the difference is that I've heard, and this is at the risk of sounding reductive of a very complex definition for two words, but diversity is getting the invitation to a party, where inclusion is you're at the party, you're represented, right? But somebody then inviting you to dance. So I think in analogies, and that was something that helped me to really differentiate, because they're interrelated, overlapping topics, right? But what's meant by diversity versus inclusion.
Yeah, I think that's a really good analogy. So funny enough, when you're talking about technical teams, when you talk about agile best practices, you mentioned cross-functional teams, and that's something that directly, I think, relates to diversity, where when we talk about cross-functional teams, we want someone from all different backgrounds. We want to have someone from a database background. We want a front-end engineer to be able to come and to succinctly tackle a project. And funny enough, I think that relates actually to how we should think about how we hire as well. We want to have lots of different people so that we can cover everything that we could possibly do, and in the best way possible.
Yeah, it always seemed to me that if we wanted our company and our services to be attracted to a diverse group, it needs diverse input to have the spectrum of thought that would be required to make it genuinely interesting.
Yeah, and I think then in order to build those products in the right way as well, you need to make sure that the company is inclusive, because then otherwise people are not going to be motivated. They're going to leave halfway through the project. So yeah, just, to me, it's just they go hand in hand. And I think I hear a lot of right now, like a lot of companies talking about diversity and not mentioning inclusion enough. It doesn't matter how diverse your company is if you don't have an inclusive workplace. That all goes out the window. All your work, all the work that you've done goes out the window. And to me, inclusion as well is the act of creating fairness. So let's say a position internally opens and that everyone is gonna be treated fairly, not just with that example, but with anything across the company, that everyone has the same opportunities, that not because of your ethnicity, gender, sexuality, you're being treated differently. And sometimes people don't realize, and that's why unconscious bias as well comes in, and that's why that's also very important to educate and train everyone in the company.
Indeed, and there's also like unconscious bias can show itself in really tiny ways as well, can't it? I think one of the phrases I've heard before is micro inequities. You know, that phrase where it's like it doesn't necessarily need to be a big thing. It might be an organization that's quite vocal on diversity and inclusion, but if at a micro level that's being undermined, presumably that can be quite destructive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's worth mentioning, we are all human beings. So in order to survive in society, we need stereotypes and we need to have certain biases. Otherwise, we wouldn't survive and we wouldn't be able to give meaning to things. The key question is here: how aware are we about our own biases, and how are we projecting that into other people? Right, and this is a work where the unconscious bias trainings comes and tries to tackle that, because the only way that you are able to tackle that is by consciously and actively, and as an individual level, you need to reflect on those biases and think about those to drive change at the end of the day.
All right then. So let's move on then, and let's apply the diversity of thought and including individuals in the innovation process. So does somebody want to give me initially their thoughts on innovation generally and what it means to them?
So for me, I always tend to bring things back to that technical thing. And for me, it's being able to put a bunch of people into a room and there not be a hierarchy, so that everyone is free to have their own ideas and it's weighed up based on like principle and like the validity of that idea. So I think for me, that's what I think about innovation happening, because otherwise, if you put parameters on it to say like, you can think what you want, but that this person who sits above you, if they don't agree with you, there's no chance of this going ahead. I think as soon as you put parameters on that, that's when you start to sort of dampen innovation for sure.
For me, innovation is the capacity that one individual has to see a problem and come up with a solution together with other people or not, in order to bring it into the next level and solve that problem. So right, when we're talking about intelligence, for instance, the definition of intelligence, we can also connect it with the way that we are deciding certain things and the way that we are innovating into certain solutions. And I think when we want to compare different people, different ways of working, different processes of thinking, that would have more creative, better solutions than what we would have as if it was just one individual with one mindset, right? And I think that's also mitigating the risk for the project, for the client, and for the company.
I concur. The innovation process, I think, to me is a free flowing series of iterative ideas, and there both needs to be, to your point, Greg, like a freedom to express that idea, but then also a feeling that you can express any idea.
Exactly. And I think Sarah hit that point right when she sort of did that metaphor of having that invitation to the party and then being asked to dance. It's one thing going to work for a company, but in order to have like an impact and feel a worth there, you have to feel like you have something to contribute and also feel like people are looking for you to contribute something. And when you do, that you're being listened to. And those are the things that I think is really important to innovation, because you can have the best ideas sat at your desk, but if you have nowhere to actually put that, then it's next to useless and it becomes incredibly frustrating at that point.
Yeah, I think innovation can be simply just seeing something from a different perspective, a new perspective.
Yes, and then feeling like the organization around you is able to hear that and then act on that.
Definitely. And I think understanding that it can come from anywhere. I think a lot of times that can happen in businesses is that maybe as we bring in that tiers of like management, what happens is that we have this like silo of where innovation happens, where it could be a case of, well, it's only these people that get to decide what we innovate on. Whereas having that quite flat hierarchy and being able to speak quite openly within in a company means that innovation is able to kind of creep through and kind of like slice through all those different levels quite easily.
Have you had experiences where you have felt not heard in these sorts of situations?
Yeah, maybe not specifically here, but I feel like there are lots of like moments in your life or companies that you can work at that they're very comfortable. They have their comfort zone, right? And for them to go outside that comfort zone, it's kind of a challenge, it's a problem, and I think it's also due to not having that diverse view or experiences. It's avoiding the risk, and sometimes by having a diverse and inclusive workforce, you just tend to get out of that comfort zone more often, and just using a different perspective, something new, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Myself, I think at Cloudreach, I've never suffered like this aspect of all. I mean, I'm pretty empowered for my manager and everything, so that's pretty cool. But before working in teams that just want to kind of focus on the status quo, and exactly if you are that person that wants to innovate, you're being basically crushed aside, because I believe that if you come to work and if you want to do your best and if you want to earn money at the end of the day, but also you want to contribute, right, that you should be able to bring yourself to work and to be able to give your ideas and to proactively discuss with your line manager and with your peers about these ideas. And I think that's the way to go, to have some passion, to have some input, personal input on your job, on your work. Other than that, because I think if you are just crushed by this mentality of you can't do this because that's the process, or I will not let you go forward because that's not the way to go, and I want to shine. It's the line manager should shine, not you. So this type of blocking behaviors, let's call it that, are really bad for innovation and creativity.
Have you had any personal experiences of that, Armando?
Yeah, so these are all kind of personal experiences, and not just with me, directly, but things, I feel that I wanted to contribute with that, and contribute with something, especially implementing a pride network, for instance, and being told that I cannot leave my job because I have to do my job. I cannot do something extra, even if I was working extra hours for that, and it is something beneficial, like as in an example, and having to fight with senior leadership for a little really small budget. And also that senior leadership was LGBTI, and that person had a bit of internalized homophobia and was saying that there was no discrimination where I was working at the moment, when there was clearly. And also when we got this budget, there was the idea that you could basically put the network for the handicapped people and the Black network together in the same network. So when you have people at leadership level making these decisions and saying these things, it's I would say sometimes it may be ignorance, not in the terms of like pejorative terms of ignorance, but it's just because that's what the people know. So I think we need to open the dialogue, open the door, and then change that culture and change that innovation so that we are able to progress further.
Yeah, I've had experience with this in the past, in a previous job before, where trying to do something like this was very much like tokenized. It was, okay, let's get as many people as we can into one room. We're going to get some badges. We're going to have a bake sale, make some money for charity. And it's all those sorts of things where it's like it's outward facing as much as possible without changing anything internally within the company. And that experience there is very much that sort of thing of just why bother? And it's very, very discouraging, and you definitely feel like you're kind of up against something.
Indeed. So let's dig into a little bit about what meaningful change could look like then. I don't know whether anyone wants to build on Greg's example there of sort of meaningless tokenistic attempts at this. What does meaningful change look like in an organization that is, well-minded?
What are the things that we can do? And there's big things, right? This is like if it was an easy thing to look at, address, confront, and fix, like we all would have done it by now, right? But one of the things that is little in effort, but big in returns, is you would ask the question, are there times when you felt your voice silenced or that you couldn't use your voice? And I was going to, there's plenty of examples where you can share feeling like that because you're the only person who looks like you in the room, and you don't feel like you can really speak up. But I think what's promising, or what I like about Cloudreach, and to the point of answering your question about what are the things that we can do, I've had kind of the opposite of that happen, where there are people who deliberately seek out my voice, or there's people that are in tune and aware, like even on this call right now, we obviously have different cues for making sure that we can raise our hand when we want to talk, but like you see that play out actually in meetings. Like I've had male managers, and this is something you can do to be an ally, right? And this is just the conscious awareness, and when you see it you can't unsee it. Managers who were going through an agenda of topics and I tried to interject something, and I'm just kind of a more quiet natured person anyway, and so it's easy to talk over me, and have your male manager say, hold on, I think Sarah had something to say, and divert the conversation back to you to give you that chance to use your voice. I mean, like I said, that's just somebody interrupting somebody else's speech for a minute, but I can't, like I'm talking about it now, I can't say how important those things are. So that's one thing for me that I'm, as a practical way of being an ally and what we can do to change. That's one that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, I think for me, making that as visible as possible is something that only helps. When I first joined Cloudreach, and we did like our Cloudy Boot session, which is your introduction to the company, it was actually my line manager, well, it was going to be my line manager, came in, and she did a fantastic talk about imposter syndrome. And this is someone who was a lesbian with a shaved head, tattoo on their head, looked very, very different from all my previous line managers, and doing such a very powerful talk on like being like valuing yourself and having that being your first introduction to a company, especially if you feel like on like the fringes of society, was incredibly valuing and very much empowering. So I think having sessions like that where automatically your first experience is to feel included and also to feel like you are valued by where you're going to be working and who you're going to be working with is incredibly important. And it does has that knock-on effect. Tech in general is very much white male dominated at the moment. And so having those sort of like behavioral changes is really important to the team. So when I was working as part of Agile Improvement Services, we maybe had times where people would sort of say like, all right, guys, and insert two female, those names there. So there was automatically that separation there. And being able to like have that conversation, say, listen, like it's not a group of guys and then two women working separately. Being able to have that conversation, say like, we're all together as one team, start treating us that way, and to actually have it followed up on was very, very powerful. And to be able to like talk about that within like your first 5 days of work was brilliant.
I remember Kaylee's imposter syndrome speech. I saw that in Berlin on one of the kickoffs, and I'd only been in the company at that point maybe 2 weeks, and I was completely blown away by it. I don't think I'd seen a presentation like that before, delivered in that way. So yeah, that deeply resonated with me. Belen, is there anything in terms of meaningful steps that you have seen organizations take that you'd like to add to the conversation?
So I think the most meaningful steps that any organization can take, first of all, is to look at the company internally and make sure that the company is inclusive itself. And then looking at the outside is being an ally with certain communities and to support communities as well. So it's not just about putting money into activities. It's about getting involved and do meaningful work. So as an example, here at CloudReach, we've got involved with a non-profit organization maybe a couple of months ago or so, and we continue partnering with them. They're called Generation, and they basically help people from disadvantaged backgrounds to get into different careers. One of them being, as an example, technology. So part of my team and also Sarah, we've been involved in doing mock interviews for them. So it's just helping them to get ready for their next interviews. We're not going to hire them because we don't have those relevant roles, but it doesn't really matter. We're trying to help, and we're trying to do something for the community as well. Then other things that we're doing with the communities, we're supporting, for example, women groups in technology. I do something in my spare time that CloudReach has really supported over the years since I started here, and that also has led us to a meaningful increase as well in diversity. So it's something that you don't need like $1 million for, but it's about putting the energy where it really matters. And we've done a lot of things here at CloudReach, employee led, supported by CloudReach as well, and that has had a big impact into our workforce as well. But as I said before, to me, like, inclusion is key. So it doesn't matter what you do with the communities, that if you don't have an inclusive culture, nothing is really gonna move forward. Yeah, so I guess those 2 points: building an inclusive workplace, as well as partnering with communities out there to support them, regardless of whether or not that's your main focus as a business right now.
So in the Berlin office, like as everybody knows, like Berlin is a very LGBTI friendly city. So it's not that we are having any issues about discrimination and everything. But in the office, we are around almost 20 people in the office in Berlin, and there are 2 people from the LGBTI community. And one of the things that I felt also when I joined is that people could really freely talk about their partners without saying the word actually partner. They can say my boyfriend, my girlfriend, without having any second judgments into that. So usually, oh, what did you do last weekend? Oh, I went with my partner to a place. I went to my partner to the cinema. This is something that it's very common for LGBTI people, especially in previous companies, that you wouldn't say like this. And I don't even need to mention that these people needed training or any type of support or any conversation around that. They were just not reacting to that, as they just reacted to it as normally as possible. And we go out and we have drinks, and we have a kind of an office community where our partners are also invited now and then. So I think that creates a really healthy atmosphere at work when everybody's just like open, because nobody's like trying to spend energy into kind of covering that part of their lives. Even if we talk about their relationships or our relationships, it's very open and in this sense. So I think that's a really good point of being an ally. It's to be able to have these conversations as normally as possible, and to be able to just be as indifferent to it as possible.
Yeah, definitely. So the normality of it is something that it's really easy to take for granted, but when you've been in a situation where it's not been the norm and you sort of like not being able to bring your full self to work, being able to come in and sort of like exhale and just have that as your day-to-day life is fantastic. So in the Edinburgh core operations team, it's very much made up of like straight white males. But the thing is that I don't feel out of place in there, and that when we have sessions where everyone like goes out to the pub afterwards and like brings their partners, I don't feel out of place bringing along my boyfriend. And it's that sort of thing where like you don't have this any sort of like nerves of people meeting your partner and like, oh my god, knowing that you have a boyfriend. It's something that makes things a lot easier. And then when you're talking about things just in like your day-to-day work, so we have a call every day at 2 o'clock, just to like for everyone to like check in and talk about something that isn't work related because we're all working from home at the moment. It's nice that like when like your boyfriend like walks past the screen, rather than like people like pretending or like asking like that, they're more like shouting to like, hey, how's it going? So yeah, having that as like your normal work routine is just much easier to work with.
And I think to add on to Greg's point as well, for me, CloudReach is the first company ever where I've been really open with my sexuality. So before, probably I should just say maybe like, partner or just not say anything. But here, since my first interview really, where it kind of like slipped through, I is so the interviewer asked me, the first question was, well, how was your weekend, something like that. I was like, yeah, just when I did this with my girlfriend, I was like, oh shit, what did I say just now? And but the interviewer didn't actually, her body language was absolutely fine, and she kind of like smiled and went on with it. And then she, at the end of the interview, she asked me a bit more about and then I thought, I think I like subconsciously that kind of like was there in my head. So when I started working at CloudReach, I was like, yeah, my girlfriend and this and that. I was like, well, I kind of shared that in the interview, like no one really can say anything. And I think all of this was in my head, but I didn't really put any thought into it. And yeah, that interviewer was my first manager, right? So that was very powerful to feel like that from the beginning. And since then I've been very open. I never hidden that I'd had a girlfriend or my sexuality, and I talk very openly about it. And it's something that sometimes kind of like you can see people that get shocked by it when you share it and their body language, but I kind of enjoy making them uncomfortable because that's what it should be like. So so yeah, it's the first time I've been able to kind of like bring my whole self to work, and that feels great. So yeah.
Yeah, in terms of allyship, it's definitely a chance to call out Maria, the Edinburgh's office manager. So last year, CloudReach sponsored the Pride event that was there. And even before that sponsorship had been agreed, our office manager had done something really thoughtful, which was to go away and get some tiny Pride flags that went on everyone's desk at the start of Pride month. Had got a big flag that was like hung above our kitchen. There was also the trans rights flag. There was also lots of different flags there, like a bisexual flag, and it was around there, and it was something that was incredibly thoughtful and done as like this like surprise, really. And it's something like that that just automatically makes you feel included and valued at work. So yeah, that's something that makes a big difference when you're coming into work and there's literally a rainbow flag above your head.
Yeah, and also based on research, let me touch base on what Bolin said about that she had it in her own head, right? So that's what we create with an inclusive environment. We create psychological safety. And also with these, seeing the pride flag and everything, we create this psychological safety, and that's what I think we feel. Of course, we can do more and everything, but I think that's what is shared by Greg and also Bolin and also me. In this sense, the psychological safety is very important, so that we don't have to spend energy in our own heads in this.
What a great point, I think, to try and now maybe cast our eyes forward a little bit. And we're recording this during the isolation period of the pandemic in 2020. And there's a lot of talk at the moment generally about the future of work, the future of workplaces. whether we're physically going to be in workplaces or whether we're going to be distributed working for longer, and whether that's going to be a legal thing or not. And I think what's probably going to happen as a result of this is how we work is going to be explored in quite a lot of detail. So what do you guys think in terms of the future of work and how diversity and inclusion can be more directly involved in shaping that? Have you given any thought to that?
That's a really interesting point. I think in terms of mobility, let's think. I'm just thinking out of my head right now. In terms of mobility, people that wouldn't be able to move so easily, for instance, they would be able to work remotely. So these people would have access to jobs that they wouldn't have access before, for instance. Also, a thing that I think a lot about. So right now, so the concept of nations was something quite recent, so it was not something that existed like 1,000 years ago. So countries have their own rules and regulations, and now with remote working, everybody can work from everywhere. So how can we make sure that with all the diverse countries in the world, with all the diverse philosophies, ideas in the world, how can we make sure that countries will be able and companies will be able to agree at a level where, so for instance, I go to Thailand 2 months and I work from there and I'm being taxed in the UK, for instance. And what's the problem with that? And maybe we want to hire people from Thailand because there it's cheaper, but then it's not going to be cheaper anymore because the work, So I think this will bring, as a societal change, will bring a lot of questions.
Oh, you've just made me really want a holiday to Thailand now.
Yeah, me too. I can imagine a pad thai on the beach.
Sorry.
I think that the urgency around investing in D&I resources has become so apparent over the past few weeks that I think many companies that previously had not prioritized the need for investing in groups or events or resources or whatever related to bringing in diverse talent or promoting an inclusive culture. I think that we'll see a lot of companies putting that at the forefront of their agendas. So I think that we'll see a lot of positive changes across all organizations in the coming months and years.
Yeah, I had a really weird moment where, and I just had to go back and check this, where like someone had messaged me on LinkedIn, and it was someone that I used to work with, and they were telling me about something that was like a DevOps engineer role that was for 6 months. This isn't me advertising the role, by the way. And they were saying that like it's a brand new team, it's like all remote working, and at the end of that, it was a great opportunity for a diversity hire, and it was something that like really struck me because I've never seen that before in like a job offer or like in a message before, and this wasn't from a recruiter. And I think even just where that's like the thought process there of just saying like, oh, this is like a really good opportunity to bring in people to the team that we wouldn't usually have within the team. I mean, the phrasing of that wasn't exactly the best, but I think just the fact that
it's
there's
stark,
like,
isn't it? Was it in bold?
Oh no. I think that's up there with like every now and then you get a job offer that's like a ninja in this or something. So yeah, I think the fact that like it's on people's minds of like thinking, oh right, this is a good chance to shake things up. I think that's what the future of work is going to look like, where we're not going to be as constricted by people who are within like such and such a like commuter belt from the office.
And Bolin, this is one of your specialist areas, of course, talent and talent acquisition. What's your view of workforces in the future and where they might choose to work?
So in terms of a future of workforce, the desire of the different generations in terms of like how do I choose where I work is shifting. So historically, diversity and inclusion was not a consideration for people to take in terms of choosing which job offer to take. But nowadays it is, and it is increasing. So there is a study by Deloitte that shares that millennials. So you have millennials and Gen Z. So you have millennials right now that their top criteria to choose a company above other, it's money, the financial reward, but the top two is a positive workplace, a diverse and inclusive place. But then you go to the Gen Z, and then it shifts it shifts a little bit, and you have diversity and inclusion at the top. So what says is, if you really want to attract the great talent out there, and especially in tech where it's like so competitive, it's not, you cannot do everything just with money and throwing money at people, which lots of companies that are doing that. It's about making sure that your company is diverse and inclusive. And there's a lot of companies, as I shared before, that they're focusing a lot on the diversity side of things. Is like, all right, let's just hire a lot of people from this collective or this collective, but then they don't really look at what the inclusion is like, and they end up losing these people. So the future of workforce is, to me, and this is based on data. This is not just my thoughts, although my thoughts are those as well. Is making sure that the workplace is diverse and inclusive and a safe place to come to work. And we're gonna see this as as the years go by. People are not gonna be just so focused on the financial rewards, and things as well flexibility, right? Flexibility is very important. So those who ask for people to be in the office 8 hours a day for 5 days a week, they're going to be left behind. We've got digital transformation, which is something that we're all very familiar with, but at the same time, it's not just about being fully remote. There's been a lot of service and studies done over COVID-19, and all of them agree that a fully remote workforce, it might not be attractive to everyone out there, but at the same time, being fully in the office is not something that people want. So having that middle ground, it's going to be very important. So to me, D&I and flexibility in terms of the future of workforce are key, and that's something that is not only for companies to showcase, but it's actually, you need to do it, because otherwise people, when they join, they're going to find out, they're going to be disappointed, and they're going to leave, and then you're going to have other problems there, which are not very, very, very easy to solve.
So have you guys got any observations or experiences of companies that have just flat out got it wrong?
So there's this large electronics company. They work a lot with wearables, and a few years ago they launched a very popular health app, but they actually missed half of the population there, I think. So they didn't include menstrual cycles, like how to track menstrual cycles in their app, and that was very big back then on the press. So they got a bit of they got told off slightly, and then in their next update they actually included it. So this company back then had 20% of their workforce was women in tech positions. So there's 20% women in the tech roles, and then they actually missed this massive.
Yeah, you nailed it at the end there, which is 20% of the workforce were from the community that were directly impacted by such a big miss on the very product that they were probably working on. So I don't know what that says, but maybe it says you just get so close to it, perhaps, and you get so close to the way the company was thinking at that point that even if you're impacted, you don't even see it sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of like that 80-20 rule where 20% of your issues are sort of masked by this other 80% in there for sure. I remember going along to a meetup group that was a lean agile coffee session, and the idea is you go along and you write on a post-it what you want to talk about there. And there was a really nice moment there where there was this middle-aged man who had his own software company, and he was sort of saying, he's tomorrow, he's like my first new female employee starts, and he's like, what do I do? He's like, the place is a mess, like the bathrooms aren't sorted and stuff like that. And it basically turned into this sort of really nice diversity and inclusion session, really. That was their unexpected session where people kind of talking to about well, this is the same as any employee starting, treat them like that, treat them as a valued employee, talk about that. So I think in that use case that you've talked about there, where it's like something was like missed, that could have been so obviously solved by having more women on the tech team.
Yeah, so as we wrap up this conversation, I think it's important to note that, the Trans Lives Matter movement is especially, relevant today with all, what we're seeing around Black Lives Matter. And I think that this is a group that we can highlight as we're not, this year, Pride it's not so much a celebration as an important moment for us to reflect and really look at why we celebrate Pride, and, shining a light on this group of people that has done so much for the civil rights movement.
I think it's very important to mention that Pride nowadays is due because of a trans woman of color in New York. So when the riot started, and I think it's good that everybody kind of goes back into a bit of history and starts making some research about that, because that's really interesting and really important to understand the oppression, right? The oppression that the Black people suffered over the years since the times of slavery until the moment where we have Pride, and we gone from that as well.
Just by way of closing, we do this on the Cloud Busting Pod. Has anybody got any 10-second recommendations on the subject for people to maybe do some more research?
There's a really good movie that I can recommend. So it's called Paris is Burning, so that people understand a bit of the dynamics of these times, and from there you can basically start thinking how these people lived, how they would want to fight, and and want to basically end the oppression that they were living. So I really recommend that movie, Paris is Burning.
So look, thank you for your insights into diversity and inclusion, and how not only does it make it more a human place to work, but it also drives greater business value on the other side of it. What a great conversation. Sid, back to you.
Thank you all so much for participating and sharing your perspectives. I hope that this is the first of many conversations around this topic that we'll have within the company. And I thank you for your time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
This
you.
has been really great to come on and talk about this.
Thank you. Thank you.